So let's create another table which will be called as post underscore comments. That will contain all the comments of a post, and besides that, that table will also contain the foreign key of the posts, and we need to create a relationship between posts and post underscore comments table. All right, so let's do that. I am going into my terminal, clear out everything, php artisan make migration, create underscore post underscore comments underscore table. Now keep in mind that the parent table should always be the first here. All right, the parent table should always be the first, and then the child table with the letter S as well. All right, so that should be plural, not the singular. In that way, the relationship will be worked out of the box for us. All right, if we do not specify that, like, but if instead of that the post underscore comments, what I do is like comments underscore post. So what will happen is like the Laravel will not automatically detect the relationship, but we have to tell the Laravel that this is the table where you should suppose to see the relationship, and we also need to specify the ID, but that's a bit advanced topic. So for that, for the moment, you should consider that the parent table should always be the first with the singular, not posts but post, and the children table or child table will be plural with containing S. So post underscore comments table. Now if I hit enter, now the table is created. Let's quickly open the migration. So now let's define the columns for our post table. So first of all, that we need is basically that would be maybe a long text which will contain the comments. All right, now this cannot be nullable. Okay, so this should not be nullable at all, but where we are having the description here, if we want to set this description nullable, so that should support null values. So what we can do, for as of now, if I go here and create, and if I give anything like testing submit, I am going to see the record like the description cannot be null. The one way is like I can set the description null by going into the database and then change it to null here. Okay, so this is the one way. So I will set this as null from here. But in order to do this with the help of migrations, what we can do is basically we can chain the method which will be called nullable. All right, so that will and if I run the migration again, so php artisan migrate fresh, so this is dropping all the tables and creating all the tables again. Now if we see here, so now the description is set to null. Now if I reload, go to structure, now you see the description is still remained in null because we have done this with the help of migrations. So we have text here. Now we need to define the foreign key. So the easiest way is table foreign ID, and this table will contain the foreign ID of post because the comments will be belongs to post, like so. Now we have defined this as this should be the foreign ID, but we also need to define the relationship. So in order to do so, table foreign, and the foreign will be the column name post ID, and on which table like this foreign key should exist or should be created, on posts. And which column should it reference? It should reference the ID here. All right, now if I go reload, run the migration one more time, and if I go to the basics table, the basics database, we now have post and post comments. So let us open the two tables side by side. And now you see we have post id created here, whereas this also contains an index here. Now this index is basically referencing to the foreign key relationship, and if you, in order to see the relationship, you can go to the relation view, and inside the relation view we will, the table will contain all the relations. So you can see the column post id, this is the basically the relationship that is defined on database basics on table post, and it is referencing the column here. All right, so that's how we can create the relationships in Laravel, okay, with the help of migrations. Now if we are going to fill the data, fill this form with the or insert the comments here by having the post id, we will then need to define the relationship between post and comments in the models in order to get the data or load the relationship. But we are not going to do that yet. There is one more thing I would like to explain you, and there are a lot of things in the migrations that we have to cover before moving to that part. That is basically, let's for example, you have a post, or maybe a lot of posts, you have a lot of posts in your table, and then you want to add a column here. All right, so maybe after the slug or after the description, like the status or active column, so like the only the posts that are active should be visible. How we are going to do that in the real on the live servers? All right, so the first method, obviously we have learned like we can run the php artisan migrate, so that will run the migrations for us. But for example, I have to create a column here, so maybe after this description I want to set this to as maybe integer. So this integer, the column name would be active. Now before that, let me show you another thing. We can also set the default values to our columns as well. So I can set this to default, and by default the active should always be 1. All right, but how I am supposed to run this command, or how am I supposed to insert this active column in our database? What is the way? Like if I run the php artisan migrate, this command, you see it says like nothing to migrate because this post table migration has already been ran. So if I do php artisan migrate fresh, what it will do is basically this will revert or drop all the databases, all the tables, and then this will run the migration, all the migrations with the 0 record all in the tables, and that we really don't want to do that. So what is the proper way? The proper way is like we create a new migration with a specific words. All right, so the new migration would be php artisan make migration, and that migration name would be add to posts table. Now these are the words that you need to memorize: add underscore to underscore posts underscore table. But what we need to add into the post table? After the add underscore, we need to give the any text or any word that you like. What I do basically, I prefer to give the exact column name that I want to add into the posts table. So in that case, I want to add underscore active column to posts table. All right, now if I hit enter, the migration has been created, and if I open the migration, now you see we have now a schema built in, but this schema is basically an empty one. All right, inside that we need to define the basically the information or the columns that we want to run. All right, so what I will do, whatever I have deleted from here, I will cut that from here and I will paste inside this one. All right, now Let's basically run the migration one more time. So PHP artisan migrate. Now you see this migration has ran successfully. And if I go here, reload the page, now you see we have an active column here. But there is one more thing, like the active column should supposed to go after the description, isn't it? How we can do that after the description? So let's quickly delete the column from here manually. And we also need to delete the migration manually as well. I will tell you the other way, like we can do with the help of command line as well. But for now, let us see how we can do that. So I want to place this after the description column. So what can I do? We can also chain a method of after description, like so. Now if I run the migration one more time, the migration has ran, and if I refresh, now we see the active column is added after the description. All right, now we have seen like the migration has two methods always, up and down. The up is used to create the table, the down is used to delete the table. All right, but here we have like schema drop if exist post stable. In this case, what if we want to revert the migration? What if I want to delete this column and I do not want to have this column here, but maybe rather after the slug here, I want to add this after the slug. So how can I do that? How can I revert? I cannot every time go to manually to the structures and I delete the column manually from here. What can I do? So in order to do so, what we need to learn first is basically whatever is defined in up schema, we need to down the schema as well. So if we run the migration that is basically rollbacking the migration, so migration should know like what should I do with the when the flag is set to rollback. So in that case, here we have drop schema. Here we are going to use the drop column. So how we can do that? Table drop column. And inside the column we can pass a single column or an array of columns. So I will preferably use the columns array. Now what I want is basically I want to set this to after slug, but in order to do so we first need to roll back this migration, this specific migration, and then we need to run the migration again. So we now have to go one step back in order to delete this migration. So how can I do that? PHP artisan migrate rollback, and I want to roll back to only one step. So what I will do is basically I will give a flag of double dash step equals to 1. If I do that, now you see the rolling back migration, which is basically this. So now if I go to the browse section here, we see no active column here because we have deleted the migration. Now just run the migration one more time and we should see the active column here, but this time after the slug. There we go. Now we learned like how we can create migrations, how we can drop the tables, how we can drop the columns, add new columns, how to set the default values, and how to set the after like how to use the after approach as well. There is one more thing before concluding the video I would like to explain. Is like, for example, let's say you want to insert more than one columns. All right, so what would be the way there? So what I preferably follow is basically I create the migration, and when I have to use more than one columns, so what I do is basically I add the migration by running the command php artisan make migration, and instead of the column name I use the add underscore columns, all right, post stable. So in that way we are assuming like we will have more than one columns. And let me open the migration. We have still the boilerplate empty. Now for example, I want to insert 2 or 3 columns. So let's say table string maybe let's say the dummy columns. So just an example, so dummy column 1, dummy column 2, and then dummy column 3. All right, now this will basically explain like there are more than one columns in this migration, and we also need to, don't forget to use the drop method as well, the down method as well. So I will use the drop column, and inside this I will pass all the column names. All right, so dummy, then dummy 1, then dummy 2. So obviously if I need to revert back, I should be able to revert back. But what I want is basically I want to do all of these columns go after the description. All right, or maybe go after the title here. So the first way is like I can use the after method, and here I can say go after the title. Okay, so this column will go after the title, but what the rest of these two? The rest of these two will go after the updated at. If you don't believe me, let's run the migration. If I migrate, now if I reload the page, you see we have dummy here, but dummy 1 and dummy 2 is going after the updated at. How we can actually set all these to go all after the title? So let us migrate the roll back the migration. Now the one way is like I can use this after method to chain on every column. So here I can set like this should go after the title, and then once it is created, then this dummy 1 should go after the dummy, and then this dummy 2 should go after the dummy 1. And if I run the migration, this should supposedly work. If I reload, now we see dummy, dummy 1, dummy 2. But that is also a not good approach in some way, like where we have more than 4, 5, 6 columns. So what is the way? Let's roll back the migration one more time. And now the proper way of doing so is basically to use a callback function. Here what I'm going to do is table chain a method of after, and inside the after I am going to use our first column would be title, and then we are going to use the callback function. Inside the callback function I am going to pass the table, because we need to pass this as an argument inside the function. All right, so now if I paste everything here, and if I run the migration one last time, I should see the same result. There we go, dummy 1, dummy 2, and dummy 3. But this is far more better approach than what we have learned or done in the previous step. Okay, so lot of things have been discussed in terms of the migrations, and I am concluding the video for till here, and we will see next things in upcoming videos.